Snapshot 25W41A brings us lots of news for the Mounds of Mayhem drop, which I've already detailed in my update video for the Snapshot. But it also brings us news for commands, item components, and much more in Data Pack version 89 and Resource Pack version 70. My name is Sliced Lime, and this is a showcase of all the pack news in this version. Let's start with commands and the new stopwatch command. This is a command that lets you track and test for the passage of real time, that is, a timer that is not coupled to the update speed of the game. This command is intended to replace the cases where the movement of the world border has been used to measure such time passing. You can use stopwatch with a namespace ID to create, query, restart, and remove stopwatches. The query form gives you the exact time of the stopwatch in chat, but is not the way to test the stopwatch. That is instead done through a new subcommand form of execute. Execute if or unless stopwatch. This takes the ID of the stopwatch to test and then a range of time in which the execute should continue. This version also includes some command fixes. The ride command can now be used to make entities mount a creaking. Teleporting repeatedly into the air no longer causes players to get kicked for flying. And in some surrounding functionality, you can now edit command blocks even if the command block's enabled game rule is off, and the cursor hover changes now work for command suggestions. Let's move on to item components. A number of new ones have been added. The Use Effects component controls the impact on player movement that using the item has. It has two fields. Can sprint, which is a boolean denoting whether the player can sprint while using the item, and speed multiplier, which is a multiplier to the player's movement speed applied while the item is active. The minimum attack charge component defines how much of the attack indicator needs to be filled before an attack can be made with the item. This ranges from 0, meaning that there is no limit, to 1, meaning that the bar has to be entirely full. The damage type component specifies which damage type a weapon deals. The format is the namespace ID of the damage type. The swing animation component specifies the animation used when the item is swung, that is, used for an attack or breaking a block. It has two fields. Type specifies the type of swing to use, one of none, whack, and stab. And the duration field specifies the duration of the swing in ticks. Kinetic weapon can be added to an item to make it work as a weapon that deals damage along a ray every tick based on relative speed while the item is in use. Min reach and max reach define the ray segment where the attack is effective. Hitbox margin is an additional range added to the hitbox of target entities when checking for impact. Delay ticks is the number of ticks the item has to be used before it starts being able to deal damage. Damage multiplier is a multiplier for the final damage based on relative speed. Forward movement specifies the distance the item animates out of the hand while the attack is active. And sound and hit sound specify the sound event IDs of sounds to play when the weapon is engaged and hits an entity. There are also three condition fields: damage conditions, knockback conditions, and dismount conditions. Each of these have three fields. Max duration ticks is the maximum number of ticks that the weapon can be active for that result to be possible. Min speed is the minimum speed the attacker has to be moving at for the result to be possible. And min relative speed is the minimum difference in speed between the attacker and target for the result to be possible. The piercing weapon component has also been added and works similarly to kinetic weapon, but instead of enabling a constant action, it enables a quick attack when the item is swung. It also has min reach, max reach, hitbox margin, sound, and hit sound fields that work exactly like those in kinetic weapon. Two booleans control the effects of the attack: deals knockback and dismounts. Those were all the new components, but there are also a couple of changed ones. The consumable component animation value spear has been renamed to trident, and spear has now been added for the actual spear. And the intangible projectile component now shows an intangible text in the item tooltip. Let's shift our attention to predicates and start with component predicates. Component predicates can now be used to check for the existence of a component. This is done using an empty object as the value for the predicate, that is, a predicate with no fields. This works both as part of an item, block, or entity predicate, as well as directly in item predicates for commands. The flags entity predicate has been extended in this version with two new checks. is in water allows the predicate to check for entities in or out of water, and is fall flying allows the predicate to check if entities are flying with elytra. This pack version also contains news for enchantments. There's a new effect component in this version called Post-Piercing Attack for entity effects that apply after an attack with a piercing weapon. There's also a new entity effect in this version called Apply Impulse, which applies an impulse to the targeted entity. It has 3 fields. Direction specifies the direction of the impulse in local entity space, that is, X is left, Y is up, and Z is forward as the entity is rotated. The coordinates scale field applies a world space scaling along the X, Y, and Z axis. And the magnitude field is a level-based value that scales the magnitude of the resulting impulse. The Play Sound entity effect has also been changed to support a list of sound events, which are picked per level. That is, the first sound is used for level 1, and so on. If the level is higher than the number of sounds, the last sound is used. There's also a new level-based value called Exponent, which raises the base value to the power of the power value. In entity data news, the fields for anger have changed, with Angry At renamed to Camel Case, and Anger Time replaced by a new Anger End Time, which specifies a timestamp in game time ticks rather than a remaining time. A bug has been fixed, so the invisibility status of an entity now updates immediately when the active effects field is modified. A new damage type in this version, the Spear damage type. And plenty of changes to tags. There is a Can Glide Through block tag, which does exactly what it says on the tin. New Nautilus related item tags, Taming items, Food, and the Bucket Food. There's also a Spears item tag, and the enchantability tags for swords have been split and remade into Melee Weapon and Sweeping, with the addition of Lunge as well. There's also a new exclusive set Lunge enchantment tag. And in entity type tag news, there are 3 new additions: Burn in Daylight, Nautilus Hostiles, and Can Wear Nautilus Armor. And with that, we can turn our attention to the resource pack news in version 70. Of course, this contains a whole host of new textures and definitions for the new items and entities. There's also a change to the texture section of MC Meta files, which now has a new Darkened Cutout Mipmap field. If this is set to true and the texture is rendered as cutout, then the mipmaps will be darkened to emulate the darker interior of the block. Only mipmaps level 0 and 1 are now animated for animated block textures. And undyed glass blocks and glass panes now support translucent textures. There's also a new texture atlas in this version, Celestials, containing the sun and moon textures as well as end flashes. In item model news, there's a new option for all item models called Swap Animation Scale, which is a float that indicates how fast the item moves up and down when swapping items in the hotbar. This is a scaling value with a default of 1. And in text news, the Unifont library used for the Unicode font in the game has been upgraded to version 17.0.01 from version 16.0.03, which includes some new glyphs for Unicode 17, among other fixes and tweaks. And that's all for this one. Thank you for watching. My name is Sliced Lime, and I'll see you next time.